everybody. Welcome back. So really excited to keep going and share with you and introduce our next speaker, Matt Fox, who is the VP of TopLeft. In his role, he's just really concerned and works hard to help MSP leaders manage workflows more efficiently using the main principle of Kanban, which we've been talking about. So TopLeft and what Matt spends his time on is builds on how managers and engineers do their daily work, letting them perform their daily tasks with much fewer clicks, prevent backlogs, and spot bottlenecks faster. So in his role as VP, Matt leads all aspects of TopLeft, from business growth, software development, customer satisfaction, and training on Agile and Kanban methods.
Okay. Hey, I just want to say thanks to the previous speakers. It's been some great sessions there. I think it given me a lot of things to think through and ideas to chew on there. So I appreciate that. What I am going to do here for you is a little bit different. I know maybe it's kind of lunchtime and you've been sitting for a while. So instead of listening to some big ideas, I'm just going to take you through some practical help here. So hopefully it's the right sort of thing to think about, and just watch and along as I kind of show you there's practical ways that TopLeft, what have we built to actually help with some of these things that the previous speakers have talked about, because Wim said maybe the software, the tools themselves are maybe only 5% of the success. That 5% of the part of the success, how are you successful? The main things are the methods that you use. But even if it's only 5%, we still don't want to leave you with a lot of big ideas. And then you're actually like, okay, it's way too much work to actually make some of these things happen, and so that you can't do it at all. So yeah, it's all going to be about practical help here. So I know that a lot of you are already TopLeft users, and so I am going to cover some of the basics here with our Kanban tool, but I am going to get into a couple of more advanced topics that we at TopLeft haven't really talked about in a while. We have done some teaching on some of these things, but it was a while ago, so it's probably new things for a lot of you. So I'm going to get into some of the more advanced stuff that I think a lot of you, everybody will find interesting, whether you're a TopLeft user already or not. So just to briefly remind you where we came from, some of these things Wim mentioned already. We are an MSP, we're ConnectWise users, and a number of years ago, we were not successful. We had a lot of these problems that Wim had mentioned. As an example, we had like 400 open tickets with 10 technicians. They were all overwhelmed and whatnot. So we tried out Agile practices, which we knew about from the software development background that we had, and tried to apply it to our MSP work, and found out, that it works really good. But it really needs some tools to make it actually work. And that's what we built out, and that's what I'll show you. But I do want to explain just a little bit more about what Kanban is. Melvin had mentioned there's a number of agile methodologies, and he definitely spoke about some of the unique things about Kanban. So I'll just also mention some of the things that we think are important about that. This is a Kanban board. You probably all recognize that. One of the main things that about Kanban is that it's a little bit less prescriptive than some of the other methodologies. So like if you compare it to Scrum, which might be one of the most well-known agile methodologies, it's less prescriptive. As an example, there's no specific meetings that Kanban calls for, whereas in Scrum there are. One of the things that's really important in Kanban is visual tools. You need to represent the work visually. So it really embraces the fact that people are visually oriented, and it's very helpful to display the work visually so that you actually understand it. Another characteristic is that it's continuous. There aren't sprints, or there's no separating up your work into time periods of any sort, like you would see in Scrum. They have their sprints, but we don't have that in Kanban. It's always a continuous process. Like what that might mean is that if you have some place where you keep your to-do work, this is like a very simple Kanban board, obviously, but if you had a process where you kind of took all the new work that you knew you needed to do, and then you had a process where you refined it a bit so that it's actually the tickets in one spot are definitely ready for an engineer to work, then that you're constantly replenishing that. It doesn't happen at one time during a certain period during a sprint. It's just a constant, constantly do it. Kanban also emphasizes minimizing work in progress. So on the Kanban board, that would be this area here, the work that you are doing right now, calls for minimizing that. One thing that helps with is just being really responsive. Because if you imagine yourself with a team, like maybe you got 6 engineers, and if everybody is working on one ticket, then you know that they're going to finish that. Each of those engineers is going to finish that ticket pretty soon, and then they'll be able to take off the next ticket, whatever's the next in the queue. And so you can, suppose that you're a dispatcher or you're a service manager, you can be fairly certain that the things that are at the top of your queue of things that haven't yet been started, they're going to be started fairly soon because your team's fairly responsive because each engineer is only working on one thing at a time. Now, if you compare that to a situation that we find a lot of MSPs in where engineers have 10 things that they've started, they're not finishing things very often, or it's unpredictable when they finish those things because they're working on so many things at once. And so it's very hard to have any certainty about when certain things that are at the top of the queue, it's hard to have certainty about when those sorts of things will be done because the engineers are just working on so many things. It also delays when you deliver the value to the customer because the customer gets all the value of the work that has been done, the work that is being done on these tickets. They get all the value from that work when it's finally done, right? A ticket that's still in the doing stage, and maybe it's halfway done from the technician's view, it's not halfway done from the customer's view, right? When the ticket is halfway done, from the customer, it's just unfinished, right? They're still working on it. I don't know much about it. The customer gets all the value of that ticket when it's totally done, when it goes over into the done column. And so that's another reason that work in progress is very important to keep that low. A characteristic of Kanban is that we focus on managing the work and not the workers. So, obviously, this board is representing the work. We're visualizing the work. That's different than what a lot of MSPs sometimes do in that they want to manage their workers carefully. And so the main thing, like, if you've ever been in the dispatch portal in ConnectWise or Autotask, it's calendar, right? It's a grid basically of your calendar and your people. And because it's all about managing the workers, kind of the work to be done is kind of a secondary thing there. It's not the main thing because they're focusing on managing the workers, and that's what tends to lead to getting a lot of work in progress for a variety of reasons. So that's a characteristic of Kanban, is that we don't focus on the workers themselves so much. We're mainly focusing on the work. And finally, Kanban emphasizes minimizing waste, and the primary way that you would think about that is by analyzing or thinking about, like, how do we handle this work, whether it's our help desk work or our project workflows and whatnot. What are we doing to that as it goes, starts out as new work, it gets dispatched, engineers work on it, some of this work ends up kind of waiting for the customer again, and eventually it ends up being done. And thinking about how does that happen in our team, and are there any steps in there that are not necessary? And by unnecessary, I mean mainly from your customer's perspective, because that's how you analyze waste, is things that aren't adding value to what you're delivering to the customer. And so that's an important part of Kanban sort of thinking, is trying to figure out how do we make this, how do we make sure that there's nothing happening there that's not really necessary, that doesn't add value from the customer's perspective. So those are some of the things that Kanban emphasizes, particularly as as an agile methodology. And you know, obviously with TopLeft, we kind of focus on the visual stuff. So let me show you. I'm going to walk you through a number of the ways that Kanban, TopLeft as a tool, can help with MSP's work that's already in, you know, your ConnectWise or your Autotask. I'm going to show you a few things. I'm going to look at how we help with service work, some example Kanban boards there, projects, sales as well. A little bit about how we accelerate the work for managers and engineers. These are some of the more basic things, and then we're going to talk about some of the more advanced things, such as time-based planning, specialized workflows, and then insights into your performance that you can get with some charts that are made by a third party. TopLeft integrates with a company called Nave, and they make some very, very powerful agile charts that I want to show you. So that'll be some of the main stuff. And then at the very end, I have a little sneak peek of where TopLeft is headed over the next, you know, towards the end of the year and whatnot. So, yeah, let's get into that. So just a brief overview of what TopLeft as a Kanban solution can do. You know, you recognize the columns. We have a column for each of the main stages of the work. This is a pretty basic example Kanban board. So obviously the main thing here is the columns and the cards within them. These are taken from tickets. Each card here represents a ticket from this system is connected into our ConnectWise sandbox. The key data on each card is it's just easier to understand in this sort of format compared to the tables that ConnectWise or Autotask makes you look at. So you've probably had the experience in your PSA of, you know, looking through these tables of tickets or projects, and you kind of think, you know, you look at the column that has the data that you're concerned about, and then you kind of look down the rows and try to figure out, okay, what am I looking at? You know, what is this telling me about what's going on? And it really, their mode is very much in like, here's your data, you figure it out. And whereas a Kanban board, since all the data about something is it's all collected in one spot, it's just easier to process and understand. You know, we got the titles, company names, who's assigned, and key details about each card, all in one place. And you're looking at it in the column that represents this stage where it is in your workflow, which is one of the most important things about it. So just, you know, it's just easier to process overall. Now, this data is synced both ways from your PSA. So it comes out of ConnectWise or Autotask into TopLeft. It stays up to date very quickly. So if you make a change to some of your data in your PSA, it shows up very quickly here. Also, if you make a change to the data here in TopLeft, it's synced immediately back to your PSA. So it doesn't matter where you're looking at the data, it's all the same. The ticket statuses are mapped to these columns. Okay, so that's how we know where, like, why is this card showing up in this column? Well, it's because we look at the status of that ticket, and then we look at how you've mapped the available statuses to the columns, and then that's how we know where to put that card. You can actually drag and drop the cards between the columns. That would actually, if I did that, that would actually go back to ConnectWise and change that ticket status. If I was to drop that there, you can also drag up and down. So, you know, Melvin had been referring to the priority of the ticket, and that has to do with the physical ordering of these cards within their columns. You know, just as if you were doing it with sticky notes on a wall, you would put them, you know, the highest priority one at the top, and so you get the same sort of thing here. And wherever you put a card in whatever order you put it in, it will stay there, and you can use that to communicate about the priority of this work within your team, because everybody sees the same order there. So as you can see, there's also some highlighting here about some problems. As an example, a lot of these things are highlighted here if they've been sitting there too long. So that's one of the main things that you want to be watching for, say if you're a service manager or project manager, is you want to know about the tickets that have stalled. Basically, you know, they're not moving through this workflow for some reason as fast as you'd expect. So here we're helping to highlight those problem tickets for you. You know, if you compare this ticket to this one has this big red indicator on it saying, hey, this one's been sitting in progress for 2 weeks, and that's a problem because it's exceeding some threshold that we set on that column. This is managing by exception. You can also see other problems highlighted here, like tickets that are overdue, or tickets that, like this one here, it's over budget. And so the software is helping you see the problems rather than making you kind of dig for them, right? It's drawing them to your attention. Another useful thing here is that the engineers see all the same work, right? They see everything just the same. So you are, ideally, the engineers are solving some of these problems even before they get up to you as a manager. So that can be a real improvement to your workflows. The board, as I said before, you know, the work on the boards goes from left to right, and the workers actually, they focus, when they're looking for new work, they go in the opposite direction. So the workers actually go from right to left because we want to focus on finishing any work that's already been started. And so when an engineer is looking for a new ticket to start, or I should say, not necessarily a new ticket to start, but you know, maybe what I mean is they come in the morning and they're looking to start their work. What do they start on? Well, they look for tickets that start on closest to the right side of the board. So I mean, completed stuff they don't need to worry about, but they would look for work that, you know, they're already assigned to in the in progress column, and they'd work on that, pull it over to completed, then do it again, look for more stuff that's in the in progress column. Eventually, they will not have anything that's assigned to them already in the in progress column, and then they can go past that, look for anything in the waiting column. That would be for things, you know, waiting on a customer. So there might not actually be anything there for them to look at. Scheduled would be for things that happen, you know, the next step is scheduled because it has to happen with the customer or something like that. So there might not be anything to do there. And then they'd be able to get over to the ready column. And then this is where they would pick up some new tickets that haven't yet been started. They'd pull those over to in progress, work that till it's done, push it over to completed, and then repeat the process, take more stuff from ready. So that's just a very, very rough introduction into how the Kanban boards work with ConnectWise and Autotask. So let me show you a few examples of like how does this actually help specific teams in your MSP. So if I am a dispatcher, as an example, I'm going to want to see a board like this one here. This is going to be an example of what we call a swim lane board. That means that we are the tickets are being grouped by a certain property. In this example, they're being grouped by who is the work assigned to. So we have a swim lane for each member of our team. In fact, we have a swim lane at the top that has the work that's not assigned to anybody. That's useful to see usually. Then we have a swim lane here for Terry as an example, then all of Joseph's work, Nicole, and so on, all down the list, and we see our whole team here. So it makes it really easy to see who's assigned to what. And a dispatcher can use that to know who is, you know, maybe some new work has come in, who do I assign that to? If I assign it to somebody who already has 10 tickets in progress, you know, then I have no idea when that's going to be done. It just makes them even busier. So I can try to assign it to somebody who has less work in their queue. Or maybe I know that this work is something that has to go to a senior engineer, so I assign it to one of the senior engineers. Not that that's necessarily what you want to do, right? Todd explained how you can make your SOPs so that junior engineers can do more types of work and things like that. So, but this is a tool that you can use to think through that sort of thing in a much faster and easier way than just if all you have is ConnectWise or Autotask. So that's a good example of how a dispatcher might use TopLeft. Here is an example of how the engineers might actually use TopLeft. They can come into a board like this one, which actually doesn't have any swim lanes, and they would apply, they can apply a little filter here so that they see only their own work. So if I'm Peter Thompson and I come in here, I filter this board and say, I only want to see any tickets that I'm assigned to. Okay, so now each technician has a view without any distractions. They know that everything on this board, as it is here, is stuff that they're responsible for somehow. And then they would also see, it would still be highlighted. For example, if there was something in progress that had been there too long, it would be highlighted and they'd see that and be able to fix those problems. So this is how an engineer might use top left. You can also see a view with a swim lane, such as a priority one. Just showing this as an example of some of the capabilities you can use. This one is the swim lanes by the priority. So at the top, we get all of our emergency tickets. We have a swim lane here for all of our quick response tickets, and then the normal ones. So you can use this to be certain that there's nothing that's kind of emergency or a higher priority that's falling between the cracks. So let's talk a little bit about project work now. Definitely very useful for project managers as well. Here's a board that is showing us our top level projects. So this one's a little bit different than the ones I was just showing you, where those cards were representing tickets. Now these cards are actually our top level projects. So this is our whole project portfolio right now. And it's useful for showing us how the projects are progressing through the pipeline, because just like tickets have a certain pipeline, projects do as well. It's also useful for highlighting problems and bringing our attention to things that are not yet problems, but are going to be if we don't, maybe if we don't make some changes. So here's an example. We see this kind of orange label. That means that it's doing this because in this example, we have a project that's supposed to be starting pretty soon and is still in the planning stage. So we want to have, bring that to our attention so that we make sure that this can start on time. Here's another example. This one is ending tomorrow, and it's still in progress. So this is highlighting it so that we can make sure that we meet that requirement. So that's good for the top level overview of your whole portfolio. Here's a view that is useful for getting the details of multiple projects at once. So this is a view that neither ConnectWise or Autotask do at all, viewing the detailed level of projects on a single page. So here we have swim lanes for each project. Here's one for one Azure migration project, a CRM upgrade, an email migration, and so on. So it's able to show us the actual details of each project on one page. Really reduces the clicking that you have to do if all you have is ConnectWise or Autotask. So this is a pretty standard one for project managers to use. We can also see the same, mostly the same view, but arranged again by who's assigned to the tickets, because just like it's useful for a help desk or a dispatcher to see the tickets as they're assigned to the team, that's also very useful for the project on the project side as well. So we get the same sort of thing here with the member swim lanes. And then finally, if we go back to this view, one thing that you sometimes think about if you're in a view like this is say, okay, I see that I have this project, the Azure migration, it's in progress now, but I want to actually drill down into that project. I want to see what are the tickets that are part of that project. And for that, we can just click this magnifying glass here. It takes us over to a view like this, which is going to be the tickets that are part of that project. And this one is organized by the phase. So you can actually, the way that you've organized the project into different phases in your PSA is also visible here as well. Now, this is a good point to mention. We have a feature coming up. We plan to ship, it's going to be available in July. In fact, the beta version of this might be available as soon as next week. And it is the client portal. So what that means is that we've heard from a lot of customers that they like their customers to be able to see boards like this. But at the moment, there's not a great way to share that with them. So maybe they have to screen share like I'm doing right now with their customers. Or maybe they have to, I don't know, print it as a PDF or something and email it to them. So it's not a very good experience to be able to share this sort of Kanban board with the customers, but that's really useful. So we're introducing the ability to actually open up TopLeft, the Kanban boards, make that actually available to your customers and give them a self-serve way to come in here as often as they want and be able to get an update on where are the details, what's going on with my project, and to be able to see where these tickets are, who's assigned, here's one, what's waiting on them. That's pretty useful. So they don't have an excuse for saying, I didn't know you were waiting on me for that sort of thing. So we anticipate that to be available in July. And actually, if you want to be part of the beta for that, then just put your name in the chat there, and we will make sure that you are that you know when when this is available, which you anticipate pretty soon. So it will be a paid option, kind of pay per customer who has access into that. But I think that's going to be really useful, especially from a project point of view. One last view here is the sales view. So this is something that's only available for ConnectWise right now, but we are going to add support to the for sales views to the Autotask side within the next few months. And so you can also view your sales pipeline from a Kanban board here. So this is one that's showing us all of our deals using the swim lanes of who's the sales person on these views. So if you've come from something like Pipedrive or HubSpot, which have Kanban boards for the sales opportunities, then you can also do that in ConnectWise, and soon you'll be able to do that in Autotask as well. Okay, so that is oh yeah, there's just one other thing. That's kind of the views of to give you insight into your work here. I also mentioned that I would say, how does TopLeft actually help you work faster day to day? And that is by things like a tool here that lets you edit the tickets. So you can change summaries and due dates and so on. You can change the tasks or checklist items on the tickets. You can manage the resources. You can dispatch, meaning assign somebody, but also do it at put in the calendar at a certain time of day. And then the big one here for engineers especially is entering time and notes right from the tool. So that will help them stay up to date, making sure that they are entering their notes throughout the day as they're working, and be able to close it off with a message to the customer and so on. So this is a sort of thing that can really make engineers and managers as well just work faster. So those are some of the basics and ways that TopLeft can really help with some of these, help an MSP become an agile MSP. Now let's talk a little bit about more of the some of the advanced things that you might not know about, even if you have been using TopLeft for a while. So some of them have to do with time-based planning, because we know that is an important thing to be able to do, even if you're an agile MSP. You need to be able to kind of manage your capacity, especially so you don't commit to things that are not realistic, that you're not going to be able to deliver on. So here are a couple of ways that we can help with that. In this, this is the project portfolio view. So these are our top level projects. They're using swim lanes by the estimated start date of the project. So here's a couple projects that started in the week of May 16th. They're waiting or in progress, so that's okay. You can look down here as we get into future dates, and that would show us, on one hand, what's starting or what has already started, but it can also focus on the things that are coming up. So it could tell you things like somehow we committed to starting 4 projects in the same week when normally we only start 1. Okay, that would be a problem that you would want to know about. So ConnectWise and Autotask would not give you any help at all in seeing that. But that actually becomes immediately apparent in something like this, where instead of one project here in this swim lane, you actually had 4. Okay, so then you'd know about it and you could go and fix that before you actually got there. So that's one way that you can do some time-based planning for your project portfolio. Another one here is the Scrumban board. So this has to do with more detailed kind of time-based planning and capacity planning. And Melvin actually mentioned this, a combination of Scrum and Kanban. So you notice that we have some of the same columns here. We have a backlog, waiting, started, complete columns and whatnot. But we have a couple columns here that are time-based, right? Because that's one of the unique things about Scrum, is that it has its sprints, and in that way it's time-based. So we have columns here for this week and next week. And you could do more actually as well. You could do 2 weeks out, you could do 3 weeks out, as far as you wanted in terms of how you want to plan. So what you need to do in your PSA is have a status for this week and a status for next week, and however far you want to go out, and set up the columns like this. And then you just make sure that a natural way to do it here would be to do it with the member swim lanes, so that you see a swim lane for each of your members. And then at the beginning of the week, you can make sure that there's the right amount of, a reasonable amount of work for each individual engineer for that week. And the engineer would, they would actually work pretty normally. They would take work out of the this week column, whatever is at the top, pull it over to the started column, work it, and then pull it over to the complete column. And eventually by the end of the week, if everything goes well, Friday afternoon, they're pulling off the last ticket from this week, and they start it and send it to the complete. This has a few benefits. So one is that you can plan out the appropriate amount of work, because you can actually see this here. If you set up the budgets on these tickets, then TopLeft will actually give you a summary of that information right here. It'll just do it automatically. So we can see that for this week, for Terry, we've got, well, in this example, it's only 5.5 hours, but you would set it up for whatever's the reasonable amount of work budgeted for that week for you. So, if you somehow set it up so that there's 60 hours there, then obviously that's a big problem. You need to fix that. Also, if it's only 10 hours, then that's a big problem too. You can give more work to Terry for this week. It can also tell, and then you do the same thing for the next week, make sure there's the right amount of hours there for next week. And when this week is done, then you just pull over the tickets from next week into this week, and Terry still has his list of things to do here. That gives you a more realistic idea of when some of this work will be done, because if you can see, there's a ticket that is, this is all set up properly, there's a reasonable amount of work here for this week. And also for this week, and something's at the top of the list for next week, then you can fairly confidently say, hey, if your customer asks you, hey, when's that work going to be done? You can fairly confidently say, yeah, we expect it to be done at the beginning of next week. It's also powerful because it's, just like all of these things with Kanban boards, it's a shared understanding. Everybody looks at the same data. So, Terry and you, the project manager, are going to have no miscommunications because it's all laid out pretty clear. And it also allows you to monitor it through the week, right? So if you get to kind of middle of the week and the this week column is still pretty full, then you're not really meeting those expectations there. You're going to have to accelerate a bit or reset some customer expectations. Also, same thing, if that column is just about empty by the middle of the week, then you can say, okay, hey, looks like we're going to start getting to some of the stuff from the next week, and you can pull those over there so that Terry doesn't run out of work to do. And this technique is also useful. I've seen some help desks use it as well. So they wouldn't do it by this week. Obviously, that's not responsive enough for a help desk, but some people have set up a today column in a help desk, and then either the dispatcher or it could be a responsibility of the technician as well. They make sure that at the beginning of the day they have their today column set out with what they think, their order of what they're planning to do for the day, and that's been very helpful for certain MSP help desk teams as well. Okay, so that's it for the time-based planning. Let's look briefly at some of this, what we call specialized boards. Most of what I've shown you so far are examples of what we know as general boards. So they've got statuses like new, ready, scheduled, waiting, in progress, and done. Like those are pretty standard columns or stages. They would work for a lot of different workflows at a lot of different MSPs. And it's useful for tracking many different types of work. Like, for a help desk, that's probably the right way to do it, because the help desk is handling a variety of different types of work. And with that sort of work, because it includes a variety of different types of work, the requirements for that work go in the ticket, right? We expect the ticket to have a decent title and a decent description so that we know what's actually required to do, whether it's a help desk or a service or a project ticket. But that's not the only not the only way to track it. You can also, if you have a very specific workflow, you can do what we call specialized boards. So one example here would be for procurement. Okay, that's a pretty typical example of a specialized board. Other examples are like your customer onboarding procedure. And, hopefully you have some good procedures around that, and what stages a customer goes through in their onboarding practice. And actually, like a sales board is actually a fairly specific procedure as well, usually. So those are some examples of other specialized boards. So you see here, this is just something I threw together. This would be an example of a specialized board. You can see that our stages here: preparing quote, waiting customer approval, approved, and so on. These are highly specialized. Like, these obviously are not going to work for any other workflow in your MSP. it's only for procurement. And chances are it's not going to work for procurement at other MSPs either, right? Because everybody has their own way that they do procurement. So what this allows you to do is really track exactly how close are we towards having this procurement, any particular procurement ticket done. If it's over on the left side of the board, obviously it's not close to being done. If it's over on the right, maybe it's in received. Hey, we got a box sitting by reception, so it's this process is pretty much done. So it can be a very powerful way to keep track of your work. And what you can do with this actually is you don't have to keep the details of the work that needs to be done. You don't have to keep that in the ticket itself because the way that this work is done is the same for all of the work that goes through here. So you might have a repository of SOPs, standard operating procedures that say, in this example, like, how do we prepare a quote? And so when there's a ticket for a certain order in here, then whoever is doing that work refers to they don't actually have to look in the details of the ticket because it's all standardized, and to know what they have to do for that ticket, they actually refer somewhere else to the SOP for how do we prepare a quote. In fact, you can have a single SOP that handles everything going through all these stages if you want to. Another thing that you can do with this is you can have one person, or maybe a team, or maybe even a single individual responsible for each column. So you can actually have a different person responsible for every column. If it was a kind of a sophisticated workflow. But for preparing the quote, you might have a salesperson responsible for that and waiting the customer approval. For actually submitting the order, that might be the responsibility of a finance person. And like I said, if for handling when it's received, maybe that could be the responsibility of the receptionist, because that's the first person who knows when a shipment is received, is the receptionist, because that's where the UPS person goes, or whatever. So that's one way that this can optimize the work and make it really clear, where the bottlenecks are in your work, or who's responsible for that sort of thing. Now, if this seems useful, there's a couple places you can look in your business, as is right now, to know, okay, like, what would be good candidates for tracking a work like this? So typically that would be, well, like I said, procurement or sales. Those are ones that generally happen for every MSP. Those are good candidates for a board like this. Another one would be to look at the project templates that you already have. Those might be good candidates for tracking it in this sort of very specialized flow. Another one would be, if you do have a repository of SOPs already, then some of them might be useful for tracking everything that's, all the work that's in that SOP right now, being able to see visually where that is, how close it is to being done. So that is this is another example of kind of an advanced technique that a lot of our customers have used to get really good visibility into where their work is. Okay, now I want to bring up the charts, the Nave charts. Okay, not a lot of people know about this. We introduced it earlier this year, and but it can be really, really useful for giving you insight into how your team is performing and helping you to identify some areas for improvement, especially by looking kind of historically. This is a way that you can get some historical insight into how your team has been performing. So that is with a company, they're at getnave.com. I'll explain at the end how do we actually integrate with them. But basically the idea here is that they have dashboards. One dashboard here, basically all the data that's here right now, it comes out of one Kanban board in TopLeft. So there's a kind of a one-to-one relationship between the dashboards that they have and a Kanban board that you would select from TopLeft. So let me take you through some of the charts that they actually offer here. Oh, and by the way, you might see in here some list of statuses that are available. What Nave calls statuses, those are just the columns in TopLeft. So if they have, if they say there's 10 tickets in progress, then that is referring to 10 tickets in the in progress column on the Kanban board that's associated with this dashboard here. So yeah, I'll just jump right in and tell you what sort of questions can we answer about our work here out of Nave. So it answers a variety of things that you might want to know that you can know like when a ticket is closed. So here's one, the cycle time scatter plot. This tells us when a ticket is closed, how long was that ticket open? So it gives us an idea about like what is our throughput. You know, are we well, it actually tells you like, are we closing tickets frequently? Like how many tickets are we closing? And how long were those tickets open at the time they were closed? So each dot here, this is kind of the right side here, it represents today, and you know, going back further in history towards the left here. And the dots get higher as they represent tickets that were open for a longer time. So for example, here's a kind of a bad example. Here's one that was open for 103 days when it was closed on, I guess, June 23rd. So obviously you want to see a lot of, you want to see lower tickets here, the dots being lower, because that represents that they were not open for very long when they were closed. It also gives you percentiles here. You know, 95% of our tickets were closed at 54 days or less. You can see the 85th and the 50th percentile. And then this green line is kind of a historical trend. So you can see, hey, are we getting better? Are we getting worse or whatnot? The cycle time breakdown here is sort of the same. You know, the right side refers to today, and this is, you know, further back in the past as we go to the left. What these are indicating for the tickets that were closed on a certain day, what proportion of their time did they spend in certain statuses when they were closed? So this one today is saying out of the tickets that were closed yesterday or a couple of days ago, they were open for 72 days cumulatively. They spent 22 days in the ready column. They spent 36 days in the scheduled column and only 16 days in the in progress column. So this is a great way to understand, like, I think Melvin had the slide that said, are things waiting in a lot of queues as our work comes in, and as we complete it, are things waiting in queues a long time? I think the example was like 16 days to deliver like 6 hours of value or something like that. Basically, it can be the case that most of your tickets are spending most of their time in queues, just waiting for somebody to work on them. And this is what will tell you that. This is the chart that will show that for you. We also got the cycle time histogram here. So this one says, what proportion of our tickets are closed within a certain number of days? So it says here, half of our tickets, so this is the mean, so 50% of our tickets are closed in 13 days or less. 95% of our tickets are closed in 54 days or less. The throughput run chart. This is kind of sort of the same thing in that it's tracking information about tickets at the time they were closed. So this one says basically how many tickets have we been closing every day and what's the trend over time. So this one's pretty straightforward. If you have a day where you close a lot of tickets, then you'll get a good high bar here. And again, it's kind of tracking the trend over time for you. The throughput histogram says, what proportion of days do we complete a certain number of tickets? So it says things like, it allows you to say, okay, like maybe yesterday we had a really good day and we closed 40 tickets in one day, but it makes sure that you don't deceive yourself and into thinking that's normal, right? Because we can actually use this to say, okay, 50% of the time we only close 10 tickets a day. And so 40 is way out of the ordinary. So it can show you things like that. It can also look into the future and make some projections based on looking at your historical data. Let's look into the future and look at some probabilities. This one, the Monte Carlo delivery date, says for a certain number of tickets, like for example, all of the tickets that are currently open on the board, what's the probability that we can complete all of them by a certain date? So this one says, based on some historical data, we got a 50% chance of, it's looking at, so is it decided on 118 tickets, but you can change that. There's a 50% chance that we're going to complete that by October 2023. And if you want to be really certain, there's the 95% chance is that you'll finish them by January of 2024. It has a different way to think about it, Monte Carlo number of tasks. So that one is given a certain end date, what's the probability that we can finish a certain number of tickets by that date? So this one says you can, if we choose the 21st of July, so 2 weeks out from today, we have a 95% certainty of finishing 7 tickets by then. 85% chance of finishing 10 by then, and if we only care about being 50% certain, then we can know that we can complete 18 tasks by then. So that one, it can allow you to project certain things, especially about your projects and whatnot. Look into the future based on the historical information. Now, one that gives us some insight into how things currently are is the this aging chart here. This one is showing you data. It's all from the TopLeft Kanban board. These are the the same columns that we have, and it's looking at how old are these cards that are in the various columns of our Kanban board here. So it says here. All of our oldest tickets, we have some here that are more than 140 days, even one that's between 180 and 200 days here. All of those are in the backlog. I guess that's kind of what you'd expect if there's some old stuff in there that is just kind of waits for the right time to do it. But we can see here a real outlier here. We have got a scheduled ticket that's been scheduled for or at least it's 136 days old. It probably hasn't spent all of its life in the scheduled column, but that's a real outlier. We want this one basically lets us find the outliers so that we can get the overall averages down by attacking the exceptions, and so it can allow you to find those. And finally, the cumulative flow diagram. This one is I consider this sort of the crown jewel of Agile charts, because there's a lot of information here. Like, to be honest, I'm even still kind of figuring out what does this all mean. So basically what's happening here is that, same thing, today is represented here on the right side, and we get further into the past as we go towards the left. These are stacked, basically the number of tickets that was in each status, or in each column at certain on certain dates. These are stacked, and then the number of completed tickets is accumulated here. That's why it's called the cumulative flow diagram, is because we're looking at the total number of tickets here that we have closed. And so that's why everything always goes up and never goes down. So this gives us insight into a few things. One thing is it can tell us how much variation are there in our workflows, where you would look for notable spikes. So this one is actually showing us there's actually quite a bit of variation in this one. This is not a good example of a steady workflow, because we can see there's some pretty significant spikes here in the number of completed tasks here on June 12th to 13th. There was quite a big spike here, also a big spike in completed work. So it looks like there's something going on in our team that has to do with closing tickets. We seem to close them in bulk all at once for some reason. And that would be something to look at here. You can also just answer, like, how many tickets did we have in each status at any day in the past month? Or you can even go past, go further back in the past. So it can answer good historical questions like that. It can say, what was the cycle time on a certain day, by looking at like kind of what's the distance between the top of the line here and the horizontal distance here. We would like it for this to be a very tight, basically the less space there is between this line here over to this line here, the faster, the smaller our cycle time. So it can answer that. And it can also answer basically, like, are we winning in terms of, are we finishing more work than we're starting? And you can judge that by these black lines here. So the top black line represents how fast is our tickets entering our system. And the bottom black line here says how fast are tickets leaving our system, how fast are we completing them? And if these lines are diverging over time, then we're not winning. Okay, there's more work entering our system than is leaving it. If the lines are converging, then we are winning, and we're going to eventually we'll get down to. I mean, in real life, we won't actually get down to zero, but what it says is that at least during that period, we finished more work than we started. And so you can see, what you want to see here is a very little variation and a very tight, these black lines are close together. And when it's not, you can identify exactly where it's not and use that to figure out like what's actually wrong with our system. Where is the best place for us to improve right now so that we can make this a tight variation and make sure that we're closing work at the same rate that is coming into our system. So how to actually set that up? Pretty simple. You would just come over here in top left, click the gear, click Nave Kanban charts, and there's instructions on how to do it here. You would sign up, you would go and get a Nave account here at getnave.com. Click see a dashboard with your data, and you want to come over here and do the upload your data to Nave, because it's a certain file upload system. So you would do this option. I think they've got a 2-week trial, and the pricing is really quite reasonable. And then you can get all that benefit. Once you've set up an export one time, then you can you're definitely going to want to configure the nightly exports, and that's what keeps it up to date without you having to come in here and do anything ever again. So that will be very useful. Now I just want to show you one little thing here. We know that TopLeft is it's not as fast, it's not as usable, and as we would like it to be. Okay, we want it to be better, and we are heading in that direction. So I wanted to just give you a very brief sneak peek at where we are going. So this is something we threw together during this week. This is an idea of where we hope to get with TopLeft, just to make it, bring it up to modern standards for usability, for speed, and we want to make it much more usable. And I thought I'd share a little bit about where we're going with that. This is very early stuff, so definitely once we make this available, it will look different. It won't look exactly like this, but I thought, hey, it's useful since you're here. I can give you a little peek into that. And we, just as a very brief idea about other things that we're planning to do over the next, it's really hard to say, but yeah, I guess I won't give any times, but we are going to be adding support for new ways to visualize your data, right? Kanban boards are super useful, but they are not the only ways to visualize your data. So we know that there are good uses for Gantt charts, and there are good uses for calendars. And so we are going to be heading in that direction once we kind of improve the overall experience with Kanban boards, like I was showing you there. We are going to be seeing how we can improve the ways that you can visually interact with all the data that you already have in ConnectWise or Autotask with other things like Kanban, Gantt charts, and calendars, and other sorts of visualizations too. So that's something that you can look forward to.